Okay, I think we will start and let the rest of the audience join in the middle of it. Then we will discuss later on. So first of all, I would like to welcome you all. A very good morning to everyone who is joining us today. Uh, I hope you are all healthy, safe, and fine, and working well. So today is the part two of the webinar that we have conducted on 14th. The agenda of the webinar was on basic of water chemistry and what is the water chemistry basic, and then system wise how does the water changes and what is the water chemistry that have the effect while we add the chemical, and what are the things that we should look first. For first few minutes we will look back like what we have discussed in the previous session. So during the last session, we have actually discussed on general water chemistry, what are the critical parameters and what are their importance, and cooling tower. These were the two topics that we have covered on 14th. I will also share you the link that we have already uploaded the recording of the webinar over YouTube. And in today's session, we will be looking into boiler water chemistry and RO water chemistry. So in the last session, we discussed about pH, what is pH, how does pH affect, what does pH means, and how does it implies, what does it imply, and how does it have a variation in temperature. That we have studied. Then we studied difference between TDS and conductivity, how they are alike one another but still have some difference when it comes to volatile compound and dissolved gases, and what are the correct ways of measuring it, and what are the universal conversion factors that we take into the consideration while talking on TDS and conductivity. Then we have hit the alkalinity. Alkalinity is one of the topic that we usually omit. Many of the people does not come into that. If you are in a power plant, then you have very good idea what is the alkalinity is. But many times in general water chemistry, we do not give that much importance to alkalinity. But alkalinity is one of the important topics. So we talk about three types of alkalinity. That is, one is hydroxyl and two are carbon-based alkalinity. In today's session also we are going to discuss a little bit more into alkalinity as we discussed in the last time. So we will also be looking into what type of, how does alkalinity affect the boiler chemistry and RO chemistry. And then other parameters like chloride, iron, silica, SDI, hardness, like that. Then we get into the cooling towers. This is an overview, and how does it changes with the system base. Then what are the chemicals that we use, like corrosion inhibitor is a phosphate based chemical, scale inhibitor is organophosphate based chemical. Then biocide, type of biocides we have, oxidizing, non-oxidizing, what are they used for and how they affect the performance of the cooling tower, and biodispersants that we have discussed. Then we discussed about some new technology that came into the market. Like this is one of the salt chlorine generation system. One of the automation that we use currently as representing NALCO. So this kind of automation that we have discussed in the last webinar. I'll share you the link where you can get the details like in what we have discussed and other automations. Then we look into two case studies. How does the chemical affect the access of the chemical and the absence of the chemical can affect the system, and how does the biological growth affect the system. And then we have a little question and answers. So coming to today's session, what we are going to discuss as in part two, we are going to discuss the critical water parameters. These parameters basically we have considered the IS standard, that is Indian standards in boiler water chemistry. I will also share you the name of the book that we have used to compile this data. Then we are looking into some important chemicals that we add in boiler, and then we will move to RO, like how does an RO do, and we will try, if time permits, we will also do a case study online. We have some good technologies that we have come across nowadays, which can really improve the performance of your system. So as we further move into the session, we will discuss all those points. Now, coming to boiler water chemistry, let us understand like how does we define the chemistry. Before defining the chemistry, we need to understand the type of boiler. So here in this presentation, I have divided the type of boiler into based on pressure as well as based on design. So how does, as in design, we come into fire tube boiler, water tube boilers, then one screw boiler and drum type boiler. So this is on based on design. When we look into, when we go to a site and when we inspect a boiler, the first thing is what is the type of boiler we look into. Then when we define the design of the boiler, then we move to the pressure, because pressure is the heart, you can say, where the chemistry changes, because at certain temperature pressure the water chemistry changes. So we look into the pressure, so we give a very keen attention that what is the pressure. So it is divided further into low pressure, medium pressure and high pressure. Then we have subcritical boiler and supercritical boilers. We are not discussing those two into this presentation. If you have any specific question to that, you can again come, you can mail us and we can discuss over mail. But for this presentation, we are only restricted to low pressure, medium pressure and high pressure boilers. Now, this is what we say is the compile of a critical parameter that you should minimum analyze when you are looking for a medium pressure and low pressure boiler. This data has been collected from the IS standard 10392, 1982. I will try to share you this book. I have the PDF of this book. I will try to share this book with you over the mail, so that you can also go through, because there is a lot of good detail that has been represented in that book. Now, coming to the parameters, if you look, the first 4 set of parameters is for the feed of the boiler. That what should be your boiler feed as per your pressure rating changes. So if you look, the pH is almost remain constant. So here, when we are talking about the pH boosting up to 20 kg has been restricted to caustic. pH boosting can be allowed, but as you move from pressure higher than 21, we always suggest that the pH boosting should be in a volatile compound, because that helps the performance of the boiler and does not affect the further boiler water chemistry when it comes into the drum. DO represents the dissolved oxygen, that what should be the oxygen concentration that you should have before your boiler water enters to the boiler. So this is the deaerator outlet concentration that you should look whenever checking into it. But what exactly happens when you go for checking the DO with using a meter? The dissolved oxygen that is available in the air always sometimes gives you a faulty reading. So we have small testing tubes we have, which consist of vacuum. We break that testing tube into the water while water is submerged and overflowing. That way we get the good idea with the change of color, like what is the dissolved oxygen. So I will share you that kit as well. So that is the dissolved oxygen. Total hardness, although the limit is 10, but we always suggest if you have the minimum hardness as possible, because the lower the hardness, the lower the chemical consumption is there into the boiler. So if you are having a zero hardness, that means you are having a very good water quality, and you can increase the cycle of the boiler, and you can reduce the cost while into the chemical consumption, as well as you can save the cost in cleaning, higher cycles, water wastage and all. Then silica, these are the 4 parameters I think everyone should analyze when they are looking into the boiler water. We have other parameters like alkalinity, chloride and all, but I think this 4 is the mandatory parameters. Dissolved oxygen is one of the parameters that is mostly skipped while analyzing the water. But I will definitely recommend, as I recommend to all of our customers, at least once in a month, you should check what is the dissolved oxygen concentration. That will give you an understanding how much your deaerator is working, how your deaerator is performing. Now coming to the boiler water, we have the pH range. I have not given the TDS range because the TDS range varies as per the boiler design. So I have not given the any TDS range out here. Then we have pH. pH, as you see the pressure increases, we are limiting the pH slightly downside. Then we have silica concentration, alkalinity concentration. Now we have residual sodium sulfite. Now what is that? That is an oxygen scavenger. These all parameters that what we are written here will be discussed further in the session. Now this is another book, IS Standards 10496 1983. This book specifically talk about high pressure boilers, where pressure rating starts from 60 kg and above. The book covers up to 118 kg. So if you look from the previous, and if you look this slide, to compare, there's a lot of new parameters that has been added in feed itself. So what are these parameters that has been added? Apart from the first 4, we added a residual hydrogen. This residual hydrogen can be replaced with any other oxygen scavenger that you are using. Hydrogen being a carcinogenic in nature, it is been banned in many of the industries, specifically in food industry or pharma industry. So we always go for a greener technology. We have few suggestions for that as well. Then we add a conductivity here because that's a very critical part when we are talking about high pressure boiler. Oil and iron with copper. These are the few parameters that we add so that we should be rest assured that whatever we are feeding into the boiler is safe for the boiler, so that you should not get any contamination from the outside. So that's why we added these four new parameters as in feed itself to make sure that no problem starts from it. So it's you can say it like root cause. You just eliminate the problem from the root itself. That means I'm making sure that my water is so good that I should not look further into it. So now coming to the boiler water. So in high pressure boilers, we have few limitations, like a chloride has been something that has been added than the previous one. We didn't have a chloride in the low pressure boiler side. We have chloride in high pressure boilers because the water that we are getting, it has been demineralized. That means all the ions that has been before mixing of the chemical, all the ions that I have nullified it. So why I have chloride in this? The chemical that we are using should not have any contamination of chloride. To understand that, we usually do the analysis of chloride, because trisodium phosphate that is available in the market can have contamination, and the one contamination that we are looking for is the chloride contamination. So that based on that you can understand what is the purity of your chemical that you are getting. So you should not have any chloride because it may contribute into the corrosion in further stage after higher temperature and higher reaction stage. So that's why we always check for chloride. But I have seen this thing that in many of the plants they don't have a practice of checking chloride, because sometimes the customer is not aware why there is a necessity of chloride. The another factor that people omit is alkalinity. That I will discuss. We have specific slide for alkalinity as well. So this is the two, you can say this is a low pressure generalization of water parameters and limits. This is a high pressure generalization of water parameters and limits. Now how the chemistry changes, we will study that in the further slide. Now coming to the oxygen scavengers, we have a variety range of oxygen scavengers that basically we use day-to-day boiler operation. Now starting with a very common oxygen scavenger. Sodium sulfite is the best oxygen scavenger where you don't have a deaerator. That means a boiler for a low pressure boiler where you don't have a deaerator, you just have a feed tank. And the oxygen, because it is open to atmosphere and the oxygen concentration is quite high, and the rate of oxygen that you require tremendously sodium sulfate. Basically fast, it is a very fast acting chemical. So it reacts with the oxygen very fast. And based on that, we very good result. We check the residue of sodium sulfite. So 1 ppm of sodium sulfite, it has been said in theory while balancing the reaction 7.8 ppm of NF3. We have usually sodium sulfite is in powdered form. And one second, I'll take a question. Is it okay if I answer all your questions at the end? Okay. About apologies for the voice. Hello. Sir, is my voice okay now? Sir, is it okay now? Is it better? Just give me a second. I'm just doing one audio check. Hello. Hello. Sir, is it okay now? Am I audible right now? Okay. Okay. Thank you. So we will continue. So like sodium sulfide is one of the oxygen scavengers that we use. But as the pressure increases, it is very difficult for sodium sulfide to cope with the oxygen because at the higher pressure rating or higher temperature rating, it got dissociated. So to understand that challenge, we go for different type of other oxygen scavengers. Best one and the common one that we use is hydrogen. Hydrogen being one of the oldest oxygen scavengers that has been used as an AVT, all volatile treatment, high pressure boilers, and few medium pressure boilers about 30 kg and all. So hydrogen is one of the favorite chemicals that has been used for generations. But after it's been declared as carcinogenic, people started looking for different options. But as hydrogen said, it requires to remove 1 ppm of oxygen, it requires 1 ppm of hydrogen. That's why when you go for a high pressure boiler, the residual hydrogen that we are looking for is in the range of 0.5, 0.05, somewhere 0.005. That is because the oxygen concentration itself is very low, and there is no point of adding unnecessary chemical into the system when you can have the chemical saving. So hydrogen have a very simple chemistry. It requires 1 ppm of to consume 1 ppm of oxygen. It requires 1 ppm of hydrogen. Then we have carbohydrate. This is a bit more greener technology, but it's not FDA approved. So if you have a system where you require a food grade certification, you cannot use it. But as an alternative to hydrogen, moving towards a little bit towards the non-carcinogenic side, you use carbohydrate, and it have a slightly different reaction than that. But again, the nitrogen formation is there. The dissociation with the oxygen, combining with oxygen, it gives you nitrogen, it gives you carbon dioxide. So to consume a ppm of oxygen required 1.4 ppm of carbohydrate. Then we have Nico, and then we have DEHA. These are the two other oxygen scavengers that has been used. 5.4 ppm to 1 ppm of oxygen, and this is DEHA is the only chemical that required higher concentration of 1 ppm of DEHA. So we require 1.24 ppm of oxygen to consume 1 ppm of DEHA. So this is how it the oxygen scavengers works. Now, apart from that, there is another oxygen scavenger I have not mentioned here. We have something called Sargart or atoberic acid. Atoberic acid is the only FDA approved oxygen scavenger that is actually available in the market, which can give you the FDA approval, as well as this is a very green technology. If your steam interactions with the food, specifically edible oil industry, we basically suggest to use atoberic acid as the best oxygen scavenger. NALCO provides, as it in Sargart 1700. That's the best oxygen scavenger for FDA approval industry. Now, here a slide, a small slide that represents the temperature versus solubility of the oxygen. So as the temperature increases, the solubility of oxygen decreases. So the higher the temperature you have in the deaerator, the better the oxygen removal actually does. So the lesser the oxygen scavenger is basically required. So that's how the temperature affects the solubility of oxygen, and based on the temperature. So whenever we are designing, whenever we are looking for the dosage of the oxygen scavenger, we always study the deaerator inlet temperature or the deaerator temperature, because based on that we can understand what is the concentration of oxygen that's available in the water, and based on that how much chemical should we add into the system that we get the proper residual into the system. Now, coming to the alkalinity. Now, why alkalinity in the boiler has such an importance? Because of the corrosion nature of hydroxyl ion when it is being there into the boiler. At a low pressure boiler, OH alkalinity prevents the corrosion, but when it moves toward the medium pressure, high pressure, the excess of OH alkalinity basically increases the corrosion rate. So it basically reacts with metal surface and releases uh, as in we can say corrosion, and that corrosion can lead to phosphate hideout and many more different problems. So it is very important for you to study what is the alkalinity of your boiler, or we specifically target the hydroxyl alkalinity. So to calculate it, how do we calculate the hydroxyl ion? All you need to have is two data. You should have the P or the phenolphthalein alkalinity, and the second one is the M or the alkalinity of the boiler, and you need to put into the formula. If you put your formula correctly, like for a low pressure boiler, your 2P minus M, that means 2 multiplied of phenolphthalein alkalinity total alkalinity should not be greater than 10% of the TDS. For medium pressure, it should not be more than 5 ppm, and for a high pressure boiler, it should be 0. That means in a high pressure boiler, my hydroxyl alkalinity should be there, because at that higher temperature or at that pressure, we face different challenges. So it is important that we should not have any hydroxyl alkalinity developed into the boiler. So it is very critical for a power plant to study your OH alkalinity. If you have any question on that, we will discuss at the end of this session. Okay, still few audio problems requests are there. We have. Sir, if you are having this audio problem, I'll do one thing at the. I'll definitely share you the link of this entire webinar. It will be live on YouTube. There I'll try. There you'll get the clear audio. Maybe because of some network issues, the audio has some issue. So over there, I tried. I'll share you the link, and there you can have able to hear the entire webinar clearly. Now coming to the phosphate, one of the chemicals that we use in the boiler is phosphate. Now why we use phosphate? Now the phosphate based on pressure have a different agenda. When you're talking about low pressure or medium pressure boiler, the agenda of phosphate here is to remove the scale. As we studied in the first slide, I may have hardness in my boiler. I may not use the DM water for my low pressure or medium pressure boiler. I can use the RO water, a high quality RO water. But if you have any ppm of hardness available into the boiler, then it should be removed, or else it is going to create scaling. So we use phosphate as in form of TSP, DSP, or MSP. Now TSP is trisodium phosphate, DSP is disodium phosphate, and MSP is monosodium phosphate. We create a blend of these three chemicals in a such a way that I should have a coordinate phosphate graph. That means my ratio of sodium to phosphate should lie between 2.6 to 2.8. In that particular ratio, if I add my phosphate into the boiler, will give me a very good effect of the phosphate, while it will not give me excess of OH alkalinity that may create some problem into the boiler. So in a low pressure boiler or in few medium pressure boiler, I use my phosphate based chemical to remove the hardness. As we move to the high pressure boiler, we cannot add any pH booster based on hydroxy. To increase the pH, we use TSP DSP combination. So when it got, as I show here in the graph, when it dissociates, it will give me some caustic effect. So that increases my pH, but it will not give me that much that it will lead for the OH alkalinity development in the boiler. So phosphate, even though in the low pressure boiler, phosphate also gives me the boost of pH rise, but there the agenda of phosphate is to remove the hardness. In high pressure, the agenda of the phosphate is to nullify the to increase the hardness, to increase the pH of the system. Now coming to pH boosters, we have three different pH boosters that we use. One is caustic based pH booster. Caustic based pH booster is basically used to build up the alkalinity, OH alkalinity. So it is definitely used in low pressure boilers and few medium pressure boilers. Why we require OH alkalinity in medium pressure and low pressure boilers? We required to react, because the calcium part will react with the TSP, but the magnesium hardness will still remain in the boiler. Excuse me. To fight with the magnesium hardness, sorry, to fight with the magnesium hardness, we require OH alkalinity. The magnesium hardness reacts with the OH alkalinity, so that while giving the proton, that hardness also should get removed along with the calcium hardness, which is being reacted with the phosphate. Now, amine base pH booster. This pH booster is basically used for two reasons. One, if you are having a high pressure boiler, the feed pH to be increased, it can be increased only by amine base or the volatile pH booster. The best example is morpholin. It is a very common used pH booster, amine base pH booster. Some also use ammonia, but ammonia have the limitation of copper. So basically, morpholin is being used in many of the area. So that it's used to increase boost the pH of the feed water, as well as if you are using the water in the condensate return and you are feeding it back to the boiler, as the steam goes and water phase turns to steam, it loses all its ions. So the pH will be, when it is condensed back, the pH will be 6.5. That will be corrosive. To counter that, and to counter the corrosion due to the steam into the pipeline, we add amine base pH booster, so that being into the volatile nature, it will fly off with the steam, protecting your steam line, as well as when it come back to the boiler as condensate return, you don't require any additional or excess of pH booster into the system. So that's why it helps in a two-way. Phosphate, as we discussed in the last slide, phosphate based pH booster is used only in the high pressure boiler to give you the pH rise into the boiler drum. The other parameters that we do study is silica. Silica specifically for turbine or a power plant is a very critical phenomena. So many of the power plants that we have studied, there is the guidelines that has been provided even for a boiler with a 60-62 kg pressure. They say the silica should be less than 2. I will definitely give you, if you have gone through the slide, I'll definitely share you the book as well. In the IS, it is specifically mentioned that your silica limit up to 60 kg or 65 kg is up to 8 to 10 ppm. So don't go for what is the parameter as in CBD it is written. Check whether you are having any carryover into this saturated steam for specifically for turbine boilers. So if you, unless until you have a 0.02 concentration of silica, less than 0.02 concentration of silica into a saturated steam, your CBD is good up to 8 ppm of silica for a high pressure boiler up to 60 kg. So it is very important to know what is the limit that has been standardized in the standard books. Apart from IS, we have ASME and other American standards. So always look for those standards first, just before following the regular treatment procedures. I definitely request, if anyone have, you can counter your treatment program manager who has been handling your water treatment to know better on silica. Then we have iron, sodium for again turbine, and COC. These are the parameters that we study for the optimization of the boiler water. Now that's all for the boiler section. Now we are moving towards the RO. Now RO water chemistry is, first we'll talk about the designing part of the RO. So in RO, what we do, we classify first based on the water. Like we ask what is the water type. To understand what is your water type, you need to understand what is brackish, sea, and water. Brackish is the raw water that you get from a source, which is which could be a bore well or river water or pond water. Having a TDS less than 10,000 you will call it as the brackish water. Sea water, as it's self-explanatory, if you are drawing the water from sea, that is called sea water, having a TDS range of 10,000 to 40,000. TDS may increase as different ranges of the country at a different part of the country. The sea water TDS may differ. Wastewater is something when you have a water, it has been utilized by a process and it is coming back, and to do the reuse, you have a proper ETP or STP has been set up. After that primary treatment, you are going to reuse the water to increase the high quality. That becomes the wastewater. An RO product is to have a water stream already processed by an RO, and the product you are reusing it or re-ROing it for the better improvement of the quality, specifically in pharma companies. So that is we call the RO product. So that's how we define the water, and these are the parameters that we actually usually essentially look for the analysis and the designing of the RO. So by the end of the presentation, we will do one case study. We will run a projection so that we can see that how does and what are the things that we look into for the designing, and how does it affect how does the water chemistry affect the designing of the RO. Now this is a screenshot of one of the software that we use. It is Hydronautics IMSD. This software basically we use for the designing of the system. As you say, the first thing that we define is the type of a water, whether it is brackish, sea, waste, or RO. And then we go into the chemistry of the water, and then the software do the calculation and give us what is the calculated TDS. So after analyzing all the chemistry we put into it, and then we will design the RO based on the specific need. Before we will go to the live projection, let us understand like what are the parameters that have an effect on designing of the RO. So pH, apart from all the general parameters, these are a few parameters that we can play with, or we can have some equipment, or we can have some technologies before RO that can change the parameters. So pH is a very one of the things that I think most of the plants do of the variation. That the addition of the chemicals, you can change the pH. Most of the plants use HCl because that is the base chemical. Because I haven't gone to any plant where we are increasing the pH. Most of the plants are reducing the pH. So we use acid to reduce the pH. So what does it affects on? It affects on the alkalinity, carbon dioxide, LSI. It also affects the how much antiscalant that you are going to use, and is the recovery. So at a different pH, you will have a different recovery because of the salt saturation and the possibility of precipitation over the surface of membrane. That may choke the membrane, and you might not get the optimum result that you're looking for. And you have to go for a CIP or something like that, which actually affects the life of the membrane. So pH is the one thing. Hardness, if you have a system with a very high hardness, it basically shifted your LSI and the quantity of antiscalant that is required to keep the surface clean. So if you have a very high hardness, you can have a softener which can reduce the hardness concentration of your system, and you can have a better recovery, and you might not have to add any acid and all because you have a low hardness. Although if you have silica, we have a different criteria. So that's come the third point. Silica, you can use dolomite. Dolomite, with the separate processing of the dolomite, you can reduce the silica, as dolomite consists of MgO, that is magnesium hydroxide. Magnesium hydroxide reacts with silica to precipitate the silica out. So you will get a lower concentration of silica into the water, and that way you can design your RO in a very higher recovery, and you can ask your supplier to design the RO on the higher recovery, because silica is one of the toughest scale that we come across the system. So it is very difficult for us to remove silica scaling. So apart from these parameters, we study the parameters in pre-treatment like iron, FRC. Now, before I move to other parameter, iron is one of the very critical parameters, because if you get iron into the water, and by any chance you have FRC into the water, the iron will act as a catalyst to damage your membrane very fast. So it is very important that you should not get any heavy metal, not just iron. We have chromium, and for steel industry we have chromium and other heavy metal. So you should not get any heavy metal. You should have a specific heavy metal removal filters. We have heavy metal removal filters. We have and others. So you should have a reason to remove all these heavy metals before your water even goes to your cartridge filter itself. So it is very important for nullifying all the heavy metals. And then we have free residual chlorine. This is to reduce, but it is very important that you should not get 20 ppm of FRC or it will oxidize and the pore size of the membrane will open up and you will not get the TDS. You will get the flow, but you will not get the desired TDS. And the entire agenda of the installation of RO may fail. SDI density index. Apart from the reactive silica, we have unreactive silica that we study using SDI. But it also indicates the biological fouling capacity of the system as well. So it is very important to know the SDI because it tells you how much, what is the water tendency of fouling, or whether you require a UF system to be installed before you are having the RO. So SDI is a critical parameter. Then turbidity TS is COD BOD specifically for the system which is installed in ETP and wastewater system. It's very important to understand that. For few seawater system also it is important to understand, but for but specifically for a wastewater system it is very important to understand the COD BOD. Color for dye industries and the textile industry is the one parameter that we study. Now, type of chemical that we use acid, as I already mentioned, for pH. The most common acid is HCl. The only problem with HCl, if it is too much in the concentration, it may damage the membrane, because consider HCl is a harsh chemical and it has side effect on the membrane. But if it is dosed in a controlled manner, it's a very good chemical for the balancing of the pH. For a system with low SO concentration, H2SO can also be used instead of HCl. It is slightly, you can say if HCl is harsh, it is a little bit of chemical on the membrane, but again, acid is an acid. So it is to be dosed in a very proper way. And all this dosing is before cartridge filter, so that what proper time to mixing up with these chemicals. But for a system with high SO4, H2SO4 cannot be used, as it may result in SO4 scaling. Biocide, we have generalized use biocide is HYPO. HYPO is one of the biocides that is used in pre-treatment, and it is being nullified using SMPA. But apart from HYPO, CaO2, we have DBNPA as a non-oxidizing biocide. So if you have a high biological load, you can also dose biocide. And if you're having a biological fouling, you can also go for biocide CIP. I have not included any cleaning procedure in this presentation. If you have any issue regarding cleaning, you can mail us and we will look into the matter. Now coming to the anti-scalate. Anti-scalate are the chemical that is used for the maintaining the recovery. In some cases, even increase the recovery of the system. So anti-scalate is to keep, it's like you have to keep your membrane clean, so that you get the proper TDS. So if your system has been choked, you can go for a CIP undoubtedly. But the higher the CIP, the more TDS may increase in your product, and the life of the membrane reduces. So a proper use of an anti-scalate should be there. Most common that is the use of like ATMP, HEDP. Some of them used in combination as well in some copolymers are used, but polyphosphate should not be there in the water, because polyphosphate again react with the calcium to form a hardness which can precipitate over the surface of your membrane. So you need to understand the chemistry of it. So if you have an anti-scalate, you can ask like what is the base of it and how does it affect the performance of the system. If possible, you can also look for the projection, and you can go for a higher recovery with the provided anti-scalate. Anti-scalate is being used for the system with higher silica concentration, and for concentration above 100%, get the bonding cell. There we go for you have to look for data increase in this case. Now coming to the technologies, we have a few technologies that we use in the real life. We have a brackish water membrane technology. For a system having a less than 10,000 ppm, we use that kind of membrane. Seawater membrane. For a system having less than 40,000 ppm, we use this. But Pro Series is something that has been new into the system, and that has been a very technology, which is that water is up to a 1 lakh TDS. This membrane can operate into that, go up to 120 kgs of pressure. So that this membrane can actually help you reducing the load on your ME. If you have any plant and if you have a huge quantity of water, so the energy consumption over there compared to here is less, and you can really use this membrane technology if you have a ZLD plant, because handling a TDS of 1 lakh give you a higher concentration, and the water load on the ME will be reduced in a very good number, and you can save a lot of energy and money for the operation of ME, because it's a challenging operation, and apart from challenging, it is a costly operation. So looking for a cost versus ease of operation, we can definitely go with the Pro Series membrane. I have few good people joining us at the end of this. I will definitely ask them to share few details over it. I will also we have a few good presentations that we will share you over the mail. What is the Pro Series and how does it changes the way you are looking into this thing, because we have something called low fouling series, that is a higher salt concentration but while as saving your energy. So if you can use it in a very different area, specifically in textile industry, where you have higher chances of fouling and all. So I'll definitely share you the presentations with over the mail, and that way, if you have any queries regarding the Pro Series, you can post a question to us. We can discuss, and we will also discuss at the end of this presentation over it. Apart from that, we have few specialized technologies. We have dairy RO, we have LS RO. Dairy RO is the membrane that is used by dairy industry for the concentration of the milk, as well as recovery of the protein and lactose from it. That is been used by many of the industries nowadays, and here the reject is the final product. So because we don't want the water that is coming out from it, so here the reject is the product that we are looking. Apart from that, we have heat sanitization RO. Heat sanitization RO, HSRO, has been used by pharma industry. In a pharma, we need to produce a very high quality water or zero conductivity water. For that, they use the RO. First, chemical based RO. That the product goes to another RO, where you cannot use any kind of chemical, because if you use any chemical, you are basically increasing the TDS back again. So we use a heat sanitization RO, where it does not require any chemical for even cleaning. Just 60-70 degrees Celsius water can be used for the sanitization of the RO. So that is called HSRO, and that has been used in the today in pharma industry. It has been really used. Now let's go to few designing as in live demos. Anyone have a question that you can ask? General purpose of so we would like to understand this. We will few people in our webinar. At the end of the webinar, sir, I will unmute. We have Mr. Kaushik Ghosh. He is from Hydronautics joining us. So I will definitely unmute, and he can share a few of the details on Pro Series as well. So before that, let's go to a design demo. So this is what when we open a software, this is what it looks like, and we first look for the water type. So first we select the water type. We will just go for a normal brackish water system. Then we start giving the inputs into like what is my hardness. condition has been not attended. Once again, little apologies for the inconvenience. So say I have 100 ppm of calcium hardness. I have 50 ppm of magnesium hardness. Let's say I have TDS of 5000, then let it be 0, 0, 0. This is alkalinity that we are talking about. So if 500 is my alkalinity, I have 200 ppm sulfide. Then if I just click here, it will automatically balance the chloride. So it has automatically calculated the chloride, and let's say I have a let's go for a higher silica concentration. Let's go I have a 20 ppm feed silicon. Now based on that, system has calculated the TDS. Now I am here with my system. If I go back to analysis, let's say I have a pH of 8.5. It has already calculated by itself what is the nature of the TDS. So we are still in the bracket bottom. Now if we move to the designing stage, let's say my membrane is 3 years. Age does not reflect that the membrane will last for 3 years. Age reflects what will be the possible TDS after 3 years if you operate an RO in a very fantastic way or in a proper way that it should. But with the wear and tear and with the workmanship, it is always difficult to obtain that. So we have few cases where we got up to 3 years, some places more than 3 years. It is all depending on how does you are operating your system. So sometimes, many of my customers ask, sir, you say the age is 3 years. I say, no, sir, if you have your RO and if you add chlorine the very next day, the age of your membrane is 1 day. That is at the end of the line. So it totally depends how do you operate your system. So if you are having a projection and it states 3 years is life, you ask her how we are going to maintain that 3 years for the life of the membrane. So I am reducing the pH. So already I got the recommendation whether I can use HCl or sulfuric. We are going for HCl. Let's say I am having a system of 75% recovery, 10 meter with the product that I am requiring. And then it goes for the selection of membrane. So now here you see we have variety of membrane. If you give us close attention, we have something called CPA7LD. This is the latest model that has been launched by Hydronautics. It's a very fantastic one. So we can further share you. So the detail of what is CPA7LD. So there, let's say we select a membrane type of membrane. We are going for CPA5LD, and then asking me to select a number of XL. So let's say I'm making it 2 stage for the higher recovery. Okay. So based on the flux, I have seen like we have put a few parameters. This is just a random projection that we are running, and then we will go for the calculation. Let the software do all the calculations. So whenever we are giving you a data, it's not random. Whenever we are designing a software, it is all software based. Because if I do any mistake, it is the software that is going to tell me that where I am mistaking. So it gives me warning whether my flow is less, what is my problem, my active skill requirement. So we use a very high-end software for the designing of your art. This software accounts all the chemistry information. So whenever you are looking for a RO, if you have an existing RO, if you have you want to procure a new RO, always go for the projection, ask for the projection, so that you will understand that it has been developed by the software. It is not we are writing an Excel sheet and we are providing. So it is all software based system, because software tells us where it went wrong and how before it was all red, now it is turn out good. Now we are the only problem is that I'm having an anti-scaling problem. So if I even further go reducing the No, still I have the problem. So what I can do, let's have a softener. I install a softener. And the problem that I am having with my anti-scaling, I do still require the anti-scaling, but now at least for the software, the parameters are good. Let's say if I go back to 7 pH, now I get the warning. So like that, having a different equipment for your system can really help you out into the designing. So this is how you basically design an entire system, and this is how you basically come the designing part of the RO. The entire chemistry has been, if I just give you the plot diagram, this is how a flow diagram look like. I'm having an acid, and this is what my streams look like, and this is what this is all the projected way that I might get all this. I may have some different parameters, slightly different parameters also can be obtained from it, because it's again, it's how you operate your system. It's purely dependent on that, and how you have maintained the health of your system. So this is how we will be designing of the system. So this is all for the presentation. I will unmute you all. If anyone have any questions, before that, I will request Kaushik sir if you can share some knowledge on Pro series. Kaushik sir, you can unmute, and if you can share some thoughts on Pro series.
Okay.
Kaushik sir. Kaushik sir. If anyone have a question, you can ask by joining. Oh, Kaushik sir is there. Kaushik sir, you can unmute yourself. I think we are having some technical problem. We will do one thing. If you have any questions with Pro Series, I will arrange a one-to-one call with Kaushik sir, and further we can discuss it over the phone. What are the Pro Series and how does it help in zero liquid discharge? Anyone else, if you have any questions presentation, you can unmute and you can definitely ask us.
Himanshu.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Jitendra sir, बोलिए. Hello.
हमारे पास लोग
सर
मेरी आवाज आ रही है?
फुल ऑडियो कंट्रोल एंड में हाँ सर ब्रेक हो रही है. Kaushik sir, I have unmuted all of you. One second, sir. I'll unmute you from here. One second.
Hello.
So it is showing self-muted. Sir. Yes,
Hello.
Kaushik sir, please. So we have
Yes.
Mr. Kaushik Ghosh. He is from Hydronautics. He's a very senior person. And so thank you for joining us. If you can share some knowledge on Pro Series, we have people interested into it.
Thank you so much, Himanshu. Am I audible now?
Yes, sir. You are audible, sir.
Yeah, great. Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Himanshu, for organizing this webinar and having me here. To all the industry people, just to let them know that Hydronautics has launched these new Pro Series membranes, which are tailor-made for the effluent treatment applications, so wastewater applications, industrial wastewater treatment, and zero liquid discharge. So here are membranes which are having added resistance towards fouling phenomena. So these are membranes which will be able to handle higher levels of COD, BOD if it is there in the wastewater stream. And these are unlike the regular brackish water or seawater elements. As you would know that commonly for the brackish water range in industrial wastewater treatment, Hydronautics has low fouling composite membranes, which is known as LFC3LD. So this is a departure from the normal brackish water membranes like the CPA series membranes, as in it has got additional surface charge properties which helps in lower fouling potential of the membranes. We have enhanced these particular characteristics in the seawater element construction, and that is where our first membrane Pro LF1 has been launched. It is the Pro low fouling membrane, which can be used for high TDS industrial wastewater. So generally right now what we see in the stage 1, we go for brackish water elements like LFC, and stage 2 onwards we go for standard seawater membranes, which tends to foul up very fast. So there we have these Pro LF1 membranes, in which the fouling tendency is actually half to 1/3 of the standard seawater elements. So the cleaning frequency we have seen is getting reduced by at least half to 1/3 times. This can correspond to an increase in the membrane life to at least 30 to 50%, because the cleaning frequencies will be reduced. Now, in every other way, it is like a standard seawater element in the way that it can handle TDS up to say 50,000 ppm. But beyond 50,000 ppm, if we want to go to upwards of 70,000 ppm, we achieve in the reject with our standard seawater elements or Pro LF1 membranes. But if we want to further concentrate 70,000 ppm into 100,000 and 120,000 ppm TDS, we need ultra high pressure membranes, and that is where our second product has come in, which is the Pro XP1 membrane, which we call the ultra high pressure RO element. And this particular RO membrane can take feed pressure up to 120 bar and concentrate the feed TDS to 120,000 and even 130,000 ppm. By doing this, what we are doing by using the spiral wound RO elements, we are increasing our overall RO system recovery, thereby reducing the load of the water into thermal evaporation technologies, be it the evaporator or subsequently the crystallizer, which are highly energy consuming. The operation cost is very, very high. We want to limit that, reduce that. So these elements help us in increasing the recovery beyond 90% and going to stretching to almost 95% now. So this is the Pro XP1 membrane, which we have piloted exhaustively in India for the last 1.5 to 2 years now, and has been giving very, very good results. And we are talking about, piloting these membranes in the dirtiest of wastewater conditions, as in the tannery effluents, the toughest conditions, as in the textile effluent. We have tested on them, piloted on them, and our membranes have been running successfully for more than 1 year. Apart from these RO membrane elements, we also have a nanofiltration membrane with special characteristics which can separate sulfate and chloride streams. Sulfate goes into the reject stream and chloride is passed on to the permeate stream. So it is a selective ion rejection nanofiltration membrane, This has benefits for the textile industry, where sodium sulfate or glauber salt is used in the process, and at the end of the second stage or the third stage RO, if we use this nanofiltration membrane, we can end up having a permeate water stream which is rich in sodium chloride and a reject water stream which is rich in sodium sulfate. And that sodium sulfate stream can actually be recycled back or reused into the manufacturing process rather than going ahead into the evaporation or crystallization technologies. So this gives a huge benefit for the textile industry, that if the reject stream of sodium sulfate can be neutralized by color removal, reduced a bit on the COD, it can actually be taken back into the manufacturing process, and we can save a lot on our evaporation technologies. So these are the 3 key products that has been introduced by Hydronautics over the past 1 year, and we'll be keen to share with you our case studies and presentations, and we can discuss more on this if any of you have any requirements in this regard. That's a brief overview.
Yes, sir.
Himanshu.
Yes, sir. So I will definitely, if thank you, sir, for sharing this with us. Have sent me some few case studies. I will share the case studies with the attendees as well. And
Sure.
if anyone is interested, we will have personal one-to-one discussion over it, and how does we can improvise your plant efficiency. And based on
That's
that,
right.
we will have further discussion. Okay. So anyone else, if want to ask any question, you can raise your hand. Yes, sir. Jitendra sir, I have unmuted you if you have any question.
Hello, Himanshu.
Yes, sir.
हमारे पास लो प्रेशर बॉयलर है
Yes, sir.
ऑक्सीजन
Yes, sir.
जिंद्रा में, उसमें क्लोरीन
Sir.
स्लीपेज के चांसेस है क्या?
सर उसमें क्लोराइड आएगा सर, क्लोरीन नहीं, क्लोराइड हम लोग उसमें एनालिसिस करते हैं, क्योंकि क्लोराइड एनालिसिस एंड उसमें क्लोराइड से कोई, क्योंकि लो प्रेशर बॉयलर है तो सर उतना उसमें इफेक्ट नहीं पड़ेगा, बिकॉज आपका जो वाटर का जो पैरामीटर्स आप देख रहे हैं, यू आर एडिंग केमिकल, फॉर एग्जांपल फॉस्फेट बेस आप जो केमिकल डालते हैं उसमें वो एलआर ग्रेड नहीं होता, तो उसमें ऑलरेडी क्लोराइड कंटामिनेशन होता है, तो लो प्रेशर बॉयलर्स में सर क्लोराइड इतना इफेक्ट नहीं करता बॉयलर को।
तो सेकंड थिंग ये है कि हमने एक ऐसा हर बार केस पाया है कि जब भी हम बॉयलर शटडाउन लेते हैं क्लीनिंग के लिए, तो ड्रम के बॉटम में हमको स्केलिंग वगैरह तो नहीं मिलता, लेकिन मिट्टी जरूर मिलता है। लेकिन जो मड रहता है, लेयर जमी रहती है मड की, उसमें कोई मेटेलिक पार्ट वगैरह ऐसा कुछ रहता नहीं, लेकिन मिट्टी रहता है, वो ये कंफर्म है। तो उसको रिमूव करने के लिए कुछ आइडिया है क्या, कुछ केमिकल वगैरह ऐसा कुछ, क्या हम वो मिट्टी भी निकाल सके अंदर से? क्लीन हमको ड्रम चाहिए
सर। ड्रम आपको अगर क्लीन किए तो सर आप थोरो फ्लशिंग फॉलोड बाय जब वेट लेयर प्रोसीजर, क्योंकि सर जो मिट्टी आपकी जमा हो रही है, सबसे पहले तो सर वो मिट्टी का एनालिसिस एक बार अगर आप करवा सकते हैं कि व्हाट क्या है वो, क्योंकि आई एम नॉट श्योर कि मिट्टी किस सिस्टम में सर उसके ऊपर सर आपसे वी विल हैव वन ऑन वन डिस्कशन विद दैट। तो वो उसके अलावा अगर कोई क्वेश्चन है तो सर, क्योंकि वो मिट्टी वाला क्वेश्चन तो थोड़ा डिटेल में आपके साथ डिस्कशन करना पड़ेगा।
ठीक है, नो क्वेश्चन।
ओके, झाला सर। ओके, ये सर झाला सर, आई हैव अनम्यूटेड यू। राजीव सिंह झाला सर। सर एनी क्वेश्चन? Okay, I think I will conclude today's webinar. I hope I will share the question that has been asked. I will also share the ProCities data with you, and this presentation and this webinar will be live on YouTube. You can go back and see. I hope this was an informative session for you as well. Thank you for all for joining us today. Have a nice day. Be safe. Thank you.